Hello, my fellow classmates of Bio 54. Today I'm going to be educating you on gluten intolerance in humans. So many of you have probably heard of gluten or have known someone who has claimed to have an intolerance to it. Though many of you are probably familiar with hearing of gluten, you probably don't know what gluten is exactly. Gluten is a protein that is found in endosperm of a grain or a kernel. Gluten can be found in wheat and other grains like oats, rye, and barley. Because of this, gluten can be found in some of your favorite foods like pizza, bread, bagels, pretzels, and even pasta. So just a little background information on gluten. During the 18,800 BCE, humans first began harvesting the grains and wild grasses in the Fertile Crescent during ancient times, consisting of Assyria, Mesopotamia, and the Nile Valley in Egypt. The creation of gluten came about during the Bronze Age of 3000 BCE to 1200 BCE to the medieval times. During this time, a species of wheat called spelt spread through Central Europe, becoming a staple in people's diets. Spelt was introduced to Switzerland, Tyrol, and Germany during the Middle Ages. This contained gluten and a good amount of protein, fiber, carbs, vitamins, and minerals. Spelt also was a hearty food for peasants during this time, but today has become something of a specialty health food. Then in the 1992, the original American Food Guide Pyramid, created by the U.S. Department of Agriculture in 1992, listed that whole grains as one of the most important food groups, stating that one should at least eat 6 to 11 servings of whole grains per day. This further solidified the presence of wheat and other grains in the American diet. Around that time, celiac disease cases began to arise. Some research believe that this increase in grain consumption is parallel to the rise of gluten intolerance. As the 2000s rolled around, there was no denying that modern wheat was quite different from what it was thousands of years ago, and even what it was in the 20th century. Due to crossbreeding over many years, modern wheat composition went through a transformation. Now it is about 2 feet tall with large seeds, whereas before it was much taller. The gluten structure in modern wheat has also changed somewhat. Though its essence it is still gluten, and modern wheat also contains higher levels of starch, amylacon A. In 2011, cardiologist Dr. William Davis published Wheat Belly, a book that argues against wheat. In this book, Davis claims that cutting wheat from your diet is the pathway to a healthier, more energetic life. Grains and gluten can make some people feel sick, he argues, and the type of grains we eat today have been so altered and modified over the years that they are no longer what they used to be. Wheat Belly also contributed the anti-gluten wave that prevented many regular people to avoid bread, pasta, and cereal, even when they had no visible gluten sensitivity. Gluten intolerance in humans is something that affects many individuals. It is important to know the various ranges in severity gluten intolerance has. Gluten intolerance in humans can range from non-selected gluten sensitivity and non-selected wheat sensitivity, or more extreme cases like the immune disorder celiac disease. Non-select gluten sensitivity and non-select wheat sensitivity and celiac disease are common in how symptoms are often resolved once gluten is completely removed from that individual's diet. It is important to address the fact that this is a serious medical condition that affects many people's health by treating the gluten proteins that has not been digested as foreign invaders, constantly causing irritation to the individual's stomach while flattening the microvilli along the wall of the small intestine. This is a major issue to these people's health because of the lack of these microvilli will result in a smaller surface area, making it much more difficult to absorb enough nutrients from the indigested food. Non-celiac gluten sensitivity and non-celiac wheat sensitivity is not as defined as other types of gluten intolerance, since it is very difficult to test and identify due to it not being an autoimmune reaction or a hemoglobin E. Adherence to a gluten-free diet is the only treatment for NCGS and NCWS at this time. Symptoms include gastrointestinal symptoms such as cramping, diarrhea, and constipation, as well as symptoms in other parts of the body such as bone and joint pain, headaches, or fatigue. People with this often fall somewhere in the middle of the spectrum of gluten intolerance. They don't have celiac disease, yet they feel noticeably better when they avoid gluten in their diet. Celiac disease is a genetic autoimmune disorder that occurs in reaction to the indigestion of gluten. To develop celiac disease, a person must inherit the gluten predisposition and also must be consuming gluten and have the disease be activated. Activation triggers include many such as stress, trauma, surgeries, and also the possibility of viral infections. The reaction to gluten causes atrophy or flattening of the cells lining of the small intestine, which can lead to the malabsorption of nutrients and related health issues. There are over 200 identified symptoms of CD, which include those listed as anemia, behavioral changes, stunted growth, and infertility. Currently, it is estimated that about 1% of the population has celiac disease, although 83% of those people are still undiagnosed. While research continues to work towards pharmaceutical or other treatments, at this time the only treatment for celiac disease is to maintain a gluten-free diet for life. After gluten is ingested, it goes straight to the stomach where it is left to be digested. This process begins when the stomach, small intestine, and pancreas secrete proteins digesting enzymes to break down this protein into smaller amino acids. However, this becomes a major problem for those who experiences any form of gluten intolerance because these people with gluten intolerance react differently to the gluten. Instead of digesting these proteins fully, those with gluten intolerance are unable to digest the gluten, and an inflammatory response is created, causing pain and other uncomfortable symptoms to this individual. Because of this, people dealing with these forms of gluten intolerance experience symptoms of malabsorption of nutrients, nutrient deficiencies, nausea, anemia, skin conditions, neurological disorders, chronic fatigue, depression, and much more. Damage done by gluten-related disorders um, go beyond just the gastrointestinal tract. Recent research over the past several decades has found that symptoms affect almost every system within the body, such as the central nervous system, the endocrine system, the cardiovascular system, the reproductive system, and the skeletal system. For many decades in the Western medical field, the mainstream view of gluten intolerance was that you either have it or you don't. In other words, you either test positive for celiac disease and have an allergy to gluten, or you test negative and therefore should have no reason to avoid gluten-containing foods. We now know that gluten intolerance symptoms fall along a spectrum, which means that it is possible to have a gluten intolerance symptoms without having celiac disease. The extent to which this is true depends on the exact person, since different people can react negatively to gluten to different degrees. Sadly, there is very few ways to treat this, but the first step is to follow a elimination diet, which is really the best way to test your own personal reaction to gluten. The results of the elimination diet help pinpoint which of your symptoms can be attributed to gluten and to let you know whether or not it's time to go gluten-free. An elimination diet involves removing gluten from your diet completely for a period of at least 30 days and then eventually adding it back in. If symptoms improve during the elimination period and then reappear once gluten is eaten again, it is a clear sign that gluten was contributing to your symptoms. However, it is very important to test only one variable at a time because this can cause you to falsely attribute symptoms. If you have a serious reaction to gluten when you add it back to your diet after the elimination period, you might want to get tested for celiac disease to know whether you need to avoid 100% gluten indefinitely. If you're sure you don't have celiac disease, you should still plan to avoid gluten as much as possible in order to prevent gut irritation further or digestive issues and ongoing symptoms. Since you will be cutting out wheat and other grains from your diet, it is important to take vitamins and supplements so that your body will be able to get the necessary nutrients it needs.